what you're buying this week. So, but really quick, everyone, I want to kind of set the stage for Tom. So Tom is the man. If you don't follow him on Twitter, Tom, make sure to plug your social. I'll probably get it wrong. I believe it's the Frugal Gay 11. Did I say that right?
That's correct.
Oh man, look at me. I'm on my game. Tom and I connected quite a while ago. He's been an inspiration to me in my real estate journey. I feel like a newbie whenever I'm talking to him or chatting with him. I have 10 doors. This man's will talk to you about just how much more he has than that. But his story's always been pretty inspiring to me. Started as a movie theater worker, which I always chuckle at because of all the AMC GameStop stuff and how it comes back to the stocks, which we obviously all know quite a bit about, and ended up retiring because of his awesome real estate portfolio. And I don't want to steal the thunder, so I'll turn it over to you, Tom, for a much better intro, and maybe you can tell us about that house you're about to buy, and then get into your spiel here.
For sure. Um, my name's Tom Brickman. I am 41 and I live in Dallas, Texas. I did leave my job, my traditional 9 to 5 in 2022, January of 2022. So it's been a little bit over 2 years. And I was able to do that by buying real estate. I started at 21. So 20 years ago, actually, next month will be my 20-year anniversary of buying real estate. I started with a $90,000 duplex in Toledo, Ohio while I was in college. And I continued to buy one a year as I moved. And I built up quite a portfolio in Dallas when I moved to Dallas to take a job at a movie theater. Spent 15 years running movie theaters, but always made time to buy at least one rental a year, which was my goal. My goal was 10 to get out. And I saw when I got to 10, that was not enough to get out. So I just kept going. When I could not make the numbers work in Dallas, Texas, I went back to Toledo, Ohio, and started buying in 2018 there again. Currently hold 22 doors. We'll hopefully have 23 doors by the end of the week. The deal was supposed to close last Friday, and I will share the details on that property. I have a mix of commercial, residential, and multifamily currently, and all 22 are currently producing rent. I do have a short-term rental, and I do have the majority are long-term single family that I have been purchasing. I self-manage the 8 in Dallas, Texas. So when I say I'm retired, I still occasionally get calls or take care of things in Dallas. And then I have a property manager and I have a contract employee that works for me up in Ohio on those properties. So I am still staying busy. The movie theater did not pay well. I started at 32,000. I worked my way up, and the last year I was there, I was right below 80,000, like 79,800. So that wasn't going to buy me a property a year. So back in college, I started selling on eBay, and I have not stopped. It was a way for me to pay for college as I went. And at the time I worked at Gap, they did tuition reimbursement. So I took advantage of every opportunity I had, but eBay fixed the shortcomings, and eBay also helped me save for my down payments and save for my properties. I flip primarily bras and
That's what I
makeup.
was about to ask.
It
Nice. Cool.
is the majority. I was just listing. I just found a box of American Eagle colognes that I purchased in 2020, and I like scanned one right before I got on here, and I was super excited because they're all selling for like $100 now. So sometimes procrastination pays, because I was definitely planning on flipping that for $30 when I bought it, but the longer it sits, the less available it is, which has been my resale method since I started. There's a reason that I stick with makeups. It's because they are small and easy to ship. And when I did start, I had a closet to store stuff in. I'm currently in my eBay room right now. But I have sold thousands of dollars worth of makeup and bras over the past 20 years, and they have helped me fuel my real estate portfolio. I do not actively source, but I do go into modes like last year in August. I'm like, my real estate bills would not stop, and I spent everything that I collected. So I went into like overhaul where I was just listing to try and fill in the gap. And that has been my resale experience for 20 years. I have never been one that is like, I need to buy this or I need to make this much a month. But when I do have hard months, eBay is like my security blanket. I do have a very small presence on Amazon as well, but the bulk of my resale comes through eBay or local pickup. Um, I did have, we do have a flea market here in Dallas, and that was the origins of a lot of my stuff that I was sourcing and reselling. And that's kind of my resale story. Um, as far as real estate and how it pays my bills, I collect just under 20,000 a month. And after my bills, I'm at about 10,000 is what I keep each month. While I was building this portfolio, it was always, you want to get to 12,000 and then have 6,000, but I saw 6,000 a month goes really quick when you have 18. I had 18 rentals when I left. Of my 22, 17 are just mine, and 5 are owned half with partners, and those were some joint ventures that I kind of got brought into to do some hand holding and help them find the right project. Those 5 that I own with partners, they are open-ended joint ventures, so I could be bought out, I could buy them out. But right now I'm pretty happy with those 3 partners that I do have on those 5 properties, and don't really want to get out of those. I have taken on I've taken on lots of the ugly non-traditional houses, which I want to break down the deal that I am hopefully closing on this week. This is in a rough neighborhood, a D plus currently neighborhood in Toledo, Ohio. And the reason I have one other D plus property, it's actually one of my favorites because I've had the same tenant in it since I purchased it in 2020. But the reason I am taking this property on is 2 reasons. One, the owner bought it from Grandpa in 2020 for $1,000, so he's super excited to sell it to me for $20,000. He did just spend $12,000 redoing the plumbing from the street to the house, so that made me really excited. But the city has 128 million going into this specific zip code in the next 6 years. So I know that I'm buying in a rough neighborhood. It does have a tenant in it. They are current. The owner just got the non-paying tenant out in April, and he placed this tenant at the beginning of May. So they are current. They are paying their bills. They just paid their water bill. And I'm buying with anticipation of what's going to be happening in the next 6 years. So at this time, I'm buying, I'm fixing the issues, because as we walked through with the tenant, we did do an inspection and we did find some issues. But total, I'm looking at 26,000 between repairs and purchase, and my rent currently is at 650 plus they pay their water. I see where this is going in that neighborhood, and I just have to be patient, and that's my play with this one. A couple of really positive things that I also like about it, because it is a really rough neighborhood, houses on both sides of this house have been torn down. So as soon as I own it, I plan on approaching the city and trying to buy those, and I'm either going to double my lot size or see what the city will approve as far as me building like a smaller ADU. They have not been doing that up until 2023, and then they just started approving some late last year, where when you buy this side lot, you can build an ADU up to 520 square feet. This really isn't an ADU neighborhood, but it could be in the next 6 years. So I like the potential of buying this piece of land from the city. I've done this 4 times now, and typically they will sell you a lot next to your property for $150. You also have no tax on that lot for the first 3 years of you owning it, and you can do whatever you want with it. You can build a garage on it. You can do fence it in and put in a pool. I mean, there's lots of options. The reason that they are not letting you just slap up a new house is because the majority of these lots were zoned in the early 1900s, and they did long, narrow houses, which they no longer approve on these lots. So that's why it was a big deal last year when they started approving ADUs. So my play with this, it's a cash purchase of $20,000. I can tell you the holdup is because the owner bought it from Grandpa with a quitclaim deed, and Grandpa got some debt after he sold it, and they have attached that to the house, even though he bought it 2 years prior. So right now they are in the process of trying to clear up the $1,600 that is attached to Grandpa for the house. So worst comes to worst, the seller has already offered to pay that $1,600 just to get the property closed and out of his life. But that will, again, hopefully clear up by the end of the week. The
Nice.
majority of my portfolio is C-class properties, and the reason I focused in on C-class properties in Dallas and in Toledo is because that's what I could afford. I do have one D-class property, which was I did a like-kind exchange where I sold a property in Dallas for $100,000, and I needed to reallocate that money. And I was out of time. You have 45 days from the day that you sell to the day that you purchase. And I just went ahead and I took this property, and like I said, I've had the same tenant in it. What I mean when I say C or D or B class, all counties or cities typically have grades on their neighborhoods. This is how they tax. An A class neighborhood is a new, highly desirable neighborhood that typically gets taxed higher. A B is a little bit older, maybe 20-year-old homes, but still super desirable, good school district. C are those older homes with a lot of blue collar workers, and D are the roughest areas. I typically encourage people to stay away from a D class property because you do get D class issues with it. If I did not know of the money that's coming into this zip code, and I did not know that there are opportunities already in the works that are approved and coming down, I wouldn't be buying this property. But the reason to grab this one is a buy and hold for me because I see where it's going and I see a lot of potential with it, especially if I can buy those side lots from the city. I'm still buying property. I bought another one that I did get financing on for $85,000 back in February. That was another one that a wholesaler actually had under contract, and she was going to buy it for herself. She put $1,000 deposit down, and she's like, hey, this inspection came back and it kind of needs everything. And I said, send me the inspection. And she sent me the inspection, and it was a really clean inspection, but everything was towards the end of its life. The roof is near the end of its life. The furnace is near the end of its life, but nothing was broke. We used that to negotiate her contracted price down to $84,000, and we bought a great property that's currently rented for $1,650, and we bought it for $84,000. So we're still hitting the 1% rule. Just so everyone's aware, 1% was the only metric I knew for the first 8 to 10 years. And what that is if you buy a $100,000 property, you want to collect $1,000 a month from it. You're collecting 1% of the value every month in rent. That was the metric that I was always using until I learned some of the other cash flow and other terms.
There we go. Sorry, I muted
Okay.
whoever that was.
No,
Tom, go ahead.
No, you're good. So 1%, if you buy a property for $100,000, you want to be able to collect $1,000 in rent. I realize as I'm talking right now, the majority of you don't have these opportunities near you, which I live 1,100 miles from Toledo, Ohio, but I'm still buying in Toledo because of these opportunities. Toledo has seen lots of over asking bids coming in now because it's one of the very few markets that are still cash flowing. It's in a landlord friendly state. And when I say landlord friendly, if I have a non-paying tenant, I can typically get them out of my property within typically 4 to 6 weeks for a non-paying tenant in Texas or Ohio. There's 10 landlord-friendly states. Those are the 10 that I would stick with if I were starting over again today.
What are those states, Tom?
I'm going to pull up my list so I don't miss one.
Because one of the things that I for sure wanted to touch on, and you're kind of doing it now, is because you and I have talked about it. I buy all my properties in Iowa. Like, for example, the last one I just bought, I got for 62K, and I charged 1,700 a month in rent. So, I'm one of the things I love about Midwest is I'm getting well above the 1% rule, and the prices are like you're saying right now. I mean, I compare the Iowa market to other markets, and like you're saying, you just can't. A lot of people can't afford, to not buy in the Midwest. So I wanted to kind of ask, and you were leaning towards this, but why you're buying in the Midwest, and I think it's similar to why I have. I mean, I'm from the Midwest, but
Iowa,
fiscally, it just makes sense.
Iowa's on there as a landlord neutral state where it doesn't
Yeah,
have
I was
laws
gonna say
protecting the
it's meh.
landlord, but it doesn't have so the 10 that do currently have landlord friendly policies in place are Texas, Florida, Indiana, Georgia, um, Tennessee sometimes, but that's changing currently. So I don't know. I haven't really been looking in Tennessee. North Carolina, Arizona, it's very expensive and hard to cash flow, but they do have landlord protections in place. Mississippi, Colorado, and Ohio. Um, a lot of Midwest, a lot of Rust Belt, a lot of not as desirable states. However, they are states that are seeing influx in population. They are states that are seeing, because of the affordability.
Yep.
Like Ohio is one of the very few states that currently allows you to, like, you can still, it's cheaper to buy than rent. And that's, has flipped in the majority of the states across the US, where it just makes more sense to rent than buy right now. But that's why I have stuck with those, because one, they're landlord friendly. And yes, I have definitely done evictions over the past 20 years. And two, you get a lot of times, especially when I was buying before this rush in 2020, you get a lot, like, you could not rebuild this house anywhere else for whatever I'm buying it for. So even the house that I'm buying for 20,000, the replacement value is 144,000 to rebuild and put it back. So there's opportunities like that, and that's why I've migrated towards those states. A couple things that I try and hit on, because some people who don't live in those states or don't understand, it is very hard to get a loan below 75,000. The way that I've kind of gotten around this for the past 20 years is I'll buy two at once. Like, I'll buy this 20,000 and then I'll buy a 50,000 and I'll bundle it and I'll fix it up and I'll take it to the bank and do a cash out refinance and get a portfolio loan, which is something that the majority of lenders do offer. You just have to get your values above 100,000 to be able to make it a profitable loan. So that's one thing that people get stuck with, where they buy this $20,000 property and then they want to go get cash out, and the bank's like, we can only loan you $75,000 or below. So when I do this, I typically bundle, and I typically you can do hard money, or the cash out that I'm working on is a 30-year fixed, which is a little bit higher interest rate, but I know that it's going to be the same payment for the next 30 years, and I don't have to worry about something terming out and shooting up in rate and whatnot. The majority of mine are 30-year fixed loans, which I have loans from 3.5 to my highest is right below 9%. I have been conservative with how much I've borrowed and how much I've taken out of real estate over the years, because I don't want to put myself in a position where I do need to go back to work. If things get tight, like I said, I will double down and work hard on eBay. But going back to a traditional 9 to 5 at this point is not something I'm really interested in. A few things that I have in the pipeline that might cause me to go back. I have a potential boutique hotel that the city approached me about up in Ohio, and it's an old mansion. And I know from already talking to lenders and other investors that a W-2 income, even if it's a very low one, is how I've been explained, may help me get financing for a project like that. But that's a worst case scenario. If that project does go through, maybe I would go back and take on a part-time job, which would get me financed for a property like that. So real estate pays my bills, which I know sounds crazy, and I know follows lots of hate from posting on Twitter. But the reality of it is, I bought one a year over the last 20 years. Sometimes I traded those up and I would turn a single family into a duplex, or I'd buy a commercial space. Um, and I think that that's also something that should be discussed with people. There's a lot of times where I get, it's not in my market. I can't do that. I can't do that. And I just posted last week about if I were starting over today, this is what I'd start with. And right now, the lowest point of entry in Dallas is like these $85,000 large one-bedroom condos. They're 900 square feet, and they're in a rougher complex. But they do have a den that could easily be converted into a second bedroom. And they do have a lot of upside as far as I can get my foot in the door with an $85,000 property, put down 20%, live in it, convert that den into a second bedroom, rent out that bedroom to generate income. And it's gotten my foot into the real estate game. And that's why I posted about this, because we are so narrow sighted when it comes to, I want to buy this, I want to buy in this neighborhood, I want to be in this property, and I want to do this, that a lot of times we feel so defeated by the $800,000 point of entry price that we ignore some of the other things that we can do to get our foot in the door. I've had two clients that I've worked with this year that both bought in California. One bought a $400,000, one bought a $585,000 property. Both are low income earners, but both used lots of like seller credits, closing costs credits. One was got a first time home buyers from the city for $5,000, and he just has to say that he has to live in the property for at least 3 years. There's those type of things that just get discredited because I'm in a high cost market. On both of these clients that bought this year, they are not rental properties. They are buying because they're going to be living in it. They're going to rent out a bedroom, or they're going to do something like that. But they were able to enter their market and actually purchase something. And they did it by exploring other alternatives outside of just saving up $85,000, $100,000. And they also did it from getting credits back from the sellers. So the one client did take on a property with termite damage, but got a full credit back. He got 3 estimates to do the repairs and mitigate, and then he got the credit back for the highest, and he went with the middle quote. So he actually ended up making a little bit of money by taking on a problem property. I've taken on a lot of problem properties. The commercial property and the hoarder house were probably my 2 largest. And I just want to walk through both of those, because one was a 2019 project and one was a 2020 project. One was in Texas and one was in Ohio. The Texas property that I bought in 2020 came off market from the flea market that I shopped at, and it came from a guy that I bought nail polish from. And he sold really good colors of nail polish, 3 for $1. And a few years prior, I had given him my card and just like, hey, if you get any more of these, just text or call and I'll come and grab them for me for sure. And he knew that I did real estate, and he inherited a hoarder house from his mother-in-law. And he's like, I'm trying to make her house payment, like she had passed away. He had inherited the house. He was trying to make the house payments and the tax payments and the insurance. And he's like, it's just crushing me. I can't do this. He's like, do you want to deal with this? And you couldn't even walk into the house. It was that hoarded. She had hoarded herself all the way out to where no entry was really feasible. The first dumpster that I got over there was a 20-yard dumpster, and I only emptied the foyer. And that was a 6-month renovation. he sold it to me for what she owed, which was 140,000. I did take a hard money loan at 10% at the time, and it was a year loan, but I paid it off, I believe, in 6 to 8 months. And then I used all my emergency savings to fix the house. So I put 80,000 in. So I was 220 in, but the house, when I went and cashed it out in 21, appraised at 425. So taking on a mess, in essence, brought me $200,000 in equity in this house. I've had the same tenants in it since December of 2020, and it's a great property that I got just by cleaning up a mess.
That was beautiful, by the way, Tom, too. I've seen that on Twitter a ton of times. You'll have to send me the link so I can share it with the group so they can see. I don't think the description even does it justice. It was gross inside, and it's beautiful now.
It was gross, and as a flipper, it was devastating having to throw away all that stuff. But there was a hole in the roof, and
I never even thought about that.
there were animals actively running in and out of the property. So 95% went in the trash. There was some preserved stuff that was untouched in the boxes in the garages. So I was able to get that. And I did find, like he told me, he's like, she keeps the, like she had a little bit of cash. I think I got like $87 from one of the bathroom mirrors she kept behind it and stuff. Um, but yeah, I had to throw away a lot. And I will tell this because this also was crushing. There was this random box of candies for men colognes that I used as a doorstop the entire time that we were cleaning. And finally, like, we got to the last dumpster, and it took 11 40-yard dumpsters. Just to put this in perspective, like, those are the biggest, hugest dumpsters. And I while we were finishing it up, I'm like just getting yard waste and everything just to fill that last dumpster and just get everything out of there. And I took this last box of candies, men's colognes, and I whipped it over the top and I threw it away. And anyways, a few days later, I realized that this Candy's men's cologne was discontinued in like 2006, and I saw that they were selling these bottles for $96 a piece, and it was a pretty hard pill to swallow, knowing that I just threw away over $1,000 because I was hot and tired in Texas. Um, but I will say that I did find some Candy's colognes in the garage, and I did sell those for $96 a piece. So it wasn't a total bust, but I probably threw away over $1,000 worth of cologne by not doing my homework. Which, as a flipper,
R.I.P.
I'm disappointed in myself for missing that. Coolest thing that I found a really cool Breitling watch, and a Leica camera, brand new in the box, inside of like a shipping box that had never been opened or touched, and it came with a couple of lenses. And those I did flip, and those sold for over $1,000 a lens. And the camera, I think, was 4 or 5,000 at the time. So that was the score, which really helped me because when I started, I anticipated putting 55,000 into it, and by the time I was done, I put 80,000 into it. Just everything in 2020, as everyone knows, just kept getting more and more and more expensive. So when I started, the roof was this price, and then by the time I got the roof onto the property or got the air conditioning put in, it just the roof almost doubled in price by the time we got it there. So plan for contingencies, and hopefully have some plan Bs or some backup things that you can sell, because there was a point where I ran out of money. I told the contractors to stop working, and I went over and I started painting, and I started like picking up the slack for all the things that I could actually do, because I didn't want the project to stall out. The second one that I brought on, I want to share for a couple of reasons. I think that people do overlook poorly listed properties, and I found this property. It was listed as a 1 bedroom, 1 bath that was just under 5,000 square feet. And what it was a retail space, and it had 3 residential units with it. And it was listed for 85,000 up in Toledo, Ohio, and it finally dropped to 75,000, and that is when I went ahead and threw in an offer of 65,000. And when I threw in this offer of 65,000, the owner at the time was renting each of the residential units for $400 a piece. And the commercial space was empty. It was an abandoned pizza shop. But once we did the actual inspection, which was like $1,200 and a hard pill to swallow, at that point I felt like I was in. If I'm spending $1,200 on an inspection, we realized that there were holes in the roof and there was multiple issues like no HVAC in the commercial space, and there's missing pipes. So we realized that a traditional bank was not going to give us a loan. How we skated around that was I did have a paid off property. The property that I bought when I was 21 was actually paid off a year prior. And I went ahead and pulled a HELOC on that property, which is a home equity line of credit. And basically, it's like a credit card attached to your property, is the best way to explain it. And I used that to buy this commercial space. I got a $75,000 HELOC on my paid off property. And I basically, on paper, bought it in cash. And I went unit by unit since the tenants were in 3 of the units. One of them moved out right away. So we worked in her unit and then we worked in the commercial space, and roughly put in 10,000 a piece. So this is another where I had 10,000 from my equity line and I used 30,000 from my emergency savings. And at the time, we were 105 in, and in 2020 it appraised at 150, and just this past year it appraised at 229. So it's doubled since we bought it and renovated it in 2019 and 2020. But it generates great cash flow every month. We put everything at market rent. So last year we collected just under 37,000 on it, on a $105,000 investment. And we've pulled the cash out and we've used it to buy other properties, but buying one of those poorly listed properties really can make or break a deal. And that deal right there opened up the door for like 3 more deals, because when I pulled cash out, I was able to buy 2 more properties, and then I got the cash out of those 2 properties and bought another property. So it's kind of goes slow until it doesn't. And this week I just had a client that closed on a property back in January, and he finally got his tenant in, and he said, all I'm doing is spending money. She's had like 4 maintenance calls since she moved in. He's like, I don't know if I want to do this. And I try and stress this to people from like 21 to 27. I remember I didn't make anything, but I wasn't losing anything on out of my pocket. Like I had to do my first eviction during that time, but I wasn't really, it was just like, I'm doing this, but there's no benefit. And then when I got to door number 5, and I was in Texas at the time, was the first year that I actually started making some cash, and it actually made sense and clicked. And I think a lot of people give up in those doors 1 through 4. And that's where I have also just been like too stubborn to give up and too stubborn to pull the plug on some things. If you've been in real estate long enough, I don't know about you, Alec, but I've lost money on deals over the last 20 years. I bought a money pit in 2005, all cocky. I was signing loan documents at the closing table and no money down, and I had no business buying a property. And then it plummeted from 85,000, which is what I purchased it for, all the way down to 30,000. And when I finally pulled the plug on it in 2015, it was 62,000 is what I sold it for. So I lost 20 to 23,000 on that one. Plus I lost money on it over the years. So there have been some bad buys over the years, but the good ones more than kind of keep me in. Have you had any bad buys over the last 10 properties?
Yeah. What I'll say to that is, I mean, no, and I'm going to knock on wood, but honestly, the reason why, I wanted you to come to a presentation, why I talk to people about it is, if I didn't have people like you and some other people local and other people that I've met on Twitter to learn from and ask questions from, I guarantee I would have, because I went in with more knowledge, I feel like, than, kind of like you're saying, like a 20-year investor. I knew exactly what I was looking for. The first property I bought was a triplex that I got for, um, I don't remember. It was like at the heart of COVID. I think I paid 110 for it. And my mortgage on it is 640. It's a traditional loan. And at the time, the units were just renting for 400. But what I went and did is and I would say it's like I think it's in a C neighborhood, like you were saying. I buy a majority of C neighborhoods, but what I do is I fix them up. And your design specifically really inspired me. I actually, I know, and you know that because I've sent you pictures and stuff and questions in DMs before, like, hey, what do you think of this design and all that kind of stuff. And so I went through and did subway tile, in the kitchen, and redid all the bathrooms, the tile and everything. And now every one of those units that when I got it was renting for 450, rents for 850 each. And so that's how I started. And I've just done that with everyone. That's what I do with everyone is I buy it kind of distressed, like you're saying. And now the one stupid thing I did do, and I don't know if it's stupid because, again, I've been lucky for the most part. I really vet my tenants. But when I first started buying, I put them in my own name. Now I have an LLC and I've quick title deed them all over to the LLC and everything. But now what I do is through a credit union, which I do recommend if you're buying local. And I'm lucky. I live in the Midwest, so I've established a relationship with a Midwest credit union that'll loan me money. Like the one I was just telling you about. It's a 3-bed, 1-bath. I got it for $60K. And again, it's funny, like the stories, right? The gentleman was dying, which I didn't know when I first made my offer. He listed it for 90. And that's my other tactic that I do with my realtor. I always lowball, like to the extreme, to set an anchor real low to almost make the seller be like, man, are we way overpricing this? And I didn't know the guy was dying, and we just happened to be the first offer. And he basically told his real estate agent, fuck it, accept it. I just want to sell it before I die. So I got this place, 3-bed, 1-bath. I didn't even really know, but everything had been redone, and that's running for 1,700 now. And my mortgage is 440 or something crazy low. So, no, to come back to the original question, so far, and again, I'm going to knock on wood again, I haven't had any bad ones, but it's because of people like yourself and others that I've met before I ever decided to buy a property, just asking millions of questions. So that'd be probably my biggest recommendation to everyone, is just keep asking questions. So, but Tom, to kind of go into the, oh, sorry, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think you hit on a really good point where you got it because you put in the offer, even though it was a really low offer. But I tweet this a lot, and what I like to share with people, I'm still buying right now because I know what it was like in 2021, and I overpaid for a property in 2021 because I got emotional and I was bidding against 5 other people. And there's still people bidding right now at 7 or 8% interest. But I can tell you, I do not want to be buying when or if the rates do drop, because I don't want to go back to what I was doing in 2021, because that's when I got emotional and I missed a sewer inspection and I ended up having to do $10,000 worth of plumbing repairs because I took something because I finally got an offer accepted. So that's why I thought when you asked me to come on and chat about this, I think it's important to do this because right now I feel like even though the rates are high, and the numbers are really close, I'm not buying anything if the numbers don't make sense. But I think it's important to jump in now before it gets to the point where you're bidding against 10 people because the rate's lowered and now they're at 5 or 6%. And now you're overpaying for a house because you can always adjust that rate if there is a correction, if there is a decrease. And I've refinanced plenty of times over the past 20 years, but you can't fix overpaying $20, $30, $40,000 for a property. And that's why, you know what, this property that I'm taking on, that's a $20,000 property that I'm collecting $650, it's not great right now. It's not like a home run, but it is, I see it in the pipeline where it's going to be. And I know once I can move that rent closer to market, which is 900, and once I can do some repairs, it can be. And I think that needs to be stressed, especially right now, because I do think that I'd rather buy now than when I'm trying to compete with 10 people at a lower rate.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Two things come to my mind there. One, we live in America, so we live in an economy that depends on inflation. So prices are always going to go up. If they don't, the economy will fail. And the last thing you'll have to worry about is making your mortgage payments because the world will be collapsing. But then two is don't overpay, right? And I'm sure you've dealt with this, Tom. And not now, my realtor's become a good friend. But I remember when we first started, he'd be like, "Oh, they'll never accept that offer." And I don't want to say pressure, but I mean, realtors are salespeople at the end of the day. They're hoping you buy the property because that's how they get paid. And I stayed 10 toes down, like I do with everything in life. But I'm like, no, this is what I'm willing to pay. I'm not going to pay a dime over, because I did do so much research on, like, okay, well, if I fix it up, like the triplex, for example, fix it up, my mortgage is, I just looked it up, 670. Shit, if I can get the rents to 850 a pop, well, then I literally just need one of those, worst case, right? Worst case, only one of those is rented. I'm cash flowing, which I've never not had all three units rented out. So never overpay either with more than you're comfortable with, even if somebody tries to get you to, is what I would say. There's all just like with stocks, where I say there's a million and one charts, and I'm sure you'll agree, Tom. There's always another deal to be had where you don't want to stretch yourself to the point of it's a bad investment, like you were saying,
For
type of thing.
For sure. And, what I've been doing, because the market is very hot in Toledo and stuff is going over asking, is I'm looking at the non-traditional stuff. I was looking at a post office last time I went up, and I was looking at a beauty salon that the city wanted repurposed into a laundromat. And
Nice.
I think exploring some of those non-traditional options, there's opportunities there too. If you're
Yep.
willing to take on some of the junk and clean this out and redo this, or make this work, there's still opportunities out there, even in the
Yep.
toughest markets. I mean, I'm watching someone closely who's doing redevelopment in Oakland, California right now, and the real estate's crazy there, but it's still an opportunity where he's turning a fourplex into a eightplex and
Nice.
reworking units. Yeah, so I think that there are still opportunities. I think that you just have to work a little bit harder, and that kind of brings me to a couple things that I've been working on and a couple things that I get asked a lot. So I wanted to make sure to touch on these. One, I bought a property in DFW and DFW is Dallas Fort Worth. I bought it back in September, and I bought it with owner financing. This is a non-traditional way to get your foot in the door, but I think with the rates being at that 7-8%, that some of the owners who own a property in cash, or inherited a property and don't know that they really want to sell it right now, are open to those non-traditional financing, because they're like, hey, if the bank's going to collect 8% on it, I'd love to collect 8% on it. So I purchased this property and I actually got 6% interest, and I also got no balloon. And what I mean with that is, this owner agreed to sell me this property in Fort Worth for 160,000. It's a small 2-bedroom, but it has 2 full baths and a gigantic yard. And what I'm seeing in that neighborhood is a lot of people buying these little 2-bedroom houses, tearing them down and putting up little big 5-bedroom, 4-bath houses. So I see the writing on the wall of what's happening, and I fixed up my 2-bedroom that I bought for 160,000 with 6% interest, and I rented it out. My rent's 1521, so I'm almost at that 1% rule. But that's another buy and hold, because I know that eventually they're going to run out of lots, and this 10,800 square foot lot that I have is going to be super desirable to someone who wants to build there. Um, but looking at non-traditional financing, a couple things that I just wanted to hit on. One, um, if you have a balloon on it, you need to make sure that you have a strategy for your exit. Because what if the rates now, and you're paying 6% to the owner, and you have a 2-year balloon and you have to get out of it, and now interest rates are 10%? You don't want to put yourself in a situation where you have to cash out and you have to take a interest rate that doesn't make sense and you have to sell a property. So make sure that you understand what you're signing, because that's something that I've had 2 people approach me. They're like, hey, this is about to term out, I don't know what to do. Don't take on a property that just simply doesn't make sense, and don't take on a property that you don't have a plan B for, because I'm seeing people who are like, oh, I want owner financing, I have bad credit. but then they're taking bad deals and they're going to lose the property in the long run. So that was the first thing. The second thing with the higher rates, and something that I'm seeing as an opportunity right now, beyond the owner financing, is the equity shares. And what I mean by that is there are people, like there's wholesalers that are like, hey, I want in on this deal, but I don't have any cash. Will you, this is a $40,000 property that's worth 100,000. Will you bring me in and I'll cut you in, you give me 10% of the property and it's your deal. I don't know if you have bought any from wholesalers, but I have. I've been highly focused on getting off-market properties because I don't want to overpay. And I think that there are good and bad deals out there. So if you trust a wholesaler, which I have a really good wholesaler that I trust, that I will give properties to, and I'm like, hey, can you find the owner of this? Or when I do Driving for Dollars, I think that strategic partnership can be huge money and a huge opportunity, because a lot of times they're doing some of the legwork and they're just getting equity in the property, and that's what they want. They don't care if you hold on to it for 2 years or 10 years or 20 years. But I think that that's a way to get a foot in the door without putting down a ton of cash. And that's something that people should or could consider when getting into real estate. Does it make sense to learn about wholesaling or start doing some cold calling to find deals? Or do I not even have a person that I can reach out to that could buy the property if I found the right thing? So networking and doing that is important. If anyone's in Florida, I'm an agent and did 90% investment in wholesaling for a couple of years. Let me know. Okay. So we have an agent in here from Florida who is doing what I'm discussing right now. And
Yeah, I've never done
use
that,
your
but now I'm going to
you
look into it.
use your network. Well, I get approached a lot, and I can tell you that the majority of the time I say no, I don't want an equity partner because I don't know you and I don't know if I want to be in business with you.
Yep.
However, if it's the right deal, or I know the person, and the wholesaler that I use is based in Hawaii, but he buys primarily in Indiana, I would feel comfortable going into business with him just because I see how he negotiates. And I also am one of those like old school investors where I feel like I shouldn't have to lie to someone to get a deal to close. And this wholesaler has that same mentality of like, I'm not going to lie to the seller and say this or do this or get this much of a fee for closing it. And I just prefer to, I'd rather lose the deal than lie. And I've lost some deals where wholesalers have lied to the seller because I'm not going to lie to someone to get a deal to close. So yeah, those are two things that I have done. Like I said, I own 17 of my 22 currently and 5 with partners. So those are deals that have come away where I've gotten equity or they've gotten equity when I've purchased it because they brought the deal or because they brought cash. And I think that that's something that should be explored in this, because maybe it doesn't make sense to just buy something out of state with no other resources. Maybe it makes sense to take on a partner who is local and who can help with this or do that. Just proceed with caution, because it can get very expensive very quickly. And that's one thing that I don't think gets talked about enough. And I think that, I'm sharing that always on Twitter. I'm trying to share my real numbers, or I was cash flow negative in my short-term rental back in January, but I anticipated it. It's in Ohio. Like, who's going to go to Ohio in January? I certainly don't want to go anywhere near there. So the fact that I was only cash flow negative $100 that month was pretty exciting. And then the fact that I was 100% occupied in April, which I didn't plan on, but it happened, was also really exciting. So it kind of blew it out of the water. So there's seasonality to it, and jumping in without understanding that doesn't get spoken about enough. The other thing that doesn't get spoken about enough is it doesn't matter if you are, you don't have the money or not, your tenant who is paying you is expecting that furnace to work, that hot water heater to work, that roof to not be leaking. These are things that are expensive. And when these guys pitch you with no money down, you can do this, you can do this, you can do this. The reality of it is, if you're the owner of the property, and by the way, I bought my first couple of properties in my name because I didn't know any better, and I have rolled them into
Yep,
different
same.
LLCs over the years. I'll say this though, some of them I would buy in my name, I'd move into them, I'd live in them for a year or two, and I'd fix them up, and then I'd roll them over into rentals. So I got great rates on them because I bought them in my name. So there's pros and cons to that. But getting started, you just want to, I have an investor that I did a session with earlier today. He bought his first property in his name just because of the way the financing was required. And down the road, if he gets a second property or a third property, then he will switch those over into an LLC at the time. So it's not something that you need to start this way. You need to start it with an LLC. You need to do that. Because I think that I got some deal.
I was just
know
gonna say, I did
got
my first 5 in my name, and the rates were great because of that.
I got a fantastic property that was bank owned in Dallas, and the only reason I got it was because it was owner occupied and going in my name. So if I had bought that into an LLC, I would have gotten lost in the wind, and I wouldn't have that property. And I lived in it for 3 years, and I loved it, and now it's a great cash flow positive rental for me. So don't be discouraged and just run away from buying anything if you don't have an LLC set up, because I think getting your foot in the door is important. And I think a lot of people are so discouraged by the high prices and the high interest rates that they're like, real estate isn't going to happen for me. And I think that it can. You just sometimes have to be creative. The house that I'm sitting in right now is the house that I wanted when I was 21. But it took me going through 12 other properties and trading up and selling off and doing that to get into the property that I actually wanted to be in. So I think that also should be stressed, because there's people out there that just want to go right to the nicest house because that's what they see on social media. And the reality is that doesn't always happen. All right. I feel like I've just talked for 50 minutes. Does anyone have questions about getting started, or about being a landlord, or about transitioning away from my job, or anything like that?
Yeah, guys, chat in or come off mute if you want to and ask questions.
Hey,
Tom, the
Tom,
other
pleasure to
go
meet
ahead,
you. I
Adam.
appreciate you just talking. But can you talk about how you vet through, different management companies that you work with when you're buying out of state?
Yes. So I can tell you the consensus amongst my clients and myself is it's very tough. And we typically go with the best of the worst. And I can tell you there's a reason that I have a contract employee on some of my properties up in Ohio, because I'm paying him $22 an hour, and I get better service paying him $22 an hour as my personal assistant than I do from management. I know that this sounds terrible, but one of the things that we've found very effective, sometimes the management companies with the worst reviews are the best, because they're the ones that are doing evictions. They're the ones that are like, the reviews are coming from like disgruntled tenants or those, and they're a little bit more receptive and a little more in favor of landlords. So they're taking care of the properties a little bit better than just someone who's collecting a check. With that being said, it's hard for all of my clients starting because they're the lowest one on the totem pole, and the management company is typically going to favor the investor with 25 properties versus the investor with one door. However, what we've done in Toledo is there's 2 that I do recommendations for, and one of them, I know that I need someone who's a little rough around the edges to get the job done and who's not afraid of stuff, and that's who we ultimately picked. And the reviews on her company are not particularly good, but I can tell you 2 things. One, I want a property manager that's responsive, and anytime I text her, she responds. And 2, I want a property manager who isn't going to be afraid to go put a notice up on a door, or who isn't going to be afraid to go do the walkthrough and send me pictures, or when I ask her to do something, take care of it. And I think that that's the best advice I can give you. don't be afraid by the bad reviews, especially if you read them, because a lot of times it's like tenants that didn't pay their rent and got evicted. Another source, Bigger Pockets web forum, is packed. I got one of my worst property managers that way, so I try and discourage anyone from doing that. But I think that I probably had a one-off. I had a bad tenant, and I think the management company probably just escalated the bad tenant there. Did I shop around at auction properties? Yes, I actually bought a crack house on eBay. It was managed by auction.com, and I bought it for $13,500. I also bought a property in cash on the courthouse steps. I was an idiot in flip-flops and cargo shorts, and I had $10,000 in my cargo pocket. And when I went to go pay the lady, I won this condo for $9,501. She was like disgruntled that I had $9,501 in my pocket, and she's like, everyone just brings a check, and I'm like, this is my first time here, let me be. So I bought a condo and I bought a property on eBay. If I could go back in time, I would buy 5 more of the condos, and I would buy not the crack house on eBay. And I will just tell you, the crack house on eBay I was very familiar with the zip code, I was not familiar with the street. And when I got off the highway after I won the property, because all of this happened in the course of a couple hours, I realized I bought on the wrong side of the highway, and it was a very rough property. But I owner financed and sold that off to a tenant a few years later. It was one of the nicest ones on the street. My all in on that one was $38,000, and we sold it for $55,000. So I'm pro auction. I've done it both courthouse steps and eBay or auction.com. 2 things. You have to have a cap and you have to stick with it. And I see people mess up on that. And my cap on that was actually 10,000. But I just got emotional towards the last like 7 minutes, and someone kept outbidding, and that's how I ended up at 13,500. And secondly, make sure you know what you're buying, because you're not going to get a realistic inside view until you own it typically. And make sure your numbers are straight and plan for worst case. Because when we opened that door and there were bullet holes in windows, and that, we were not prepared for what we got on that auction. What's your X factor you see to go for a junk property? I don't understand the question really. Like I think
I kind of understand it, Tom. I can rephrase it. I think what he's saying is, like, when we buy properties that are distressed, and what makes us say yes? For me at least, it's looking at rent comps in the area and figuring out, if I put X amount in, could I even get more than that? Like a couple of my properties that I put enough money in, I'm not kidding, every time I have a lease coming up, I'll post it on Facebook, and before that lease is even up, I already have another one signed, because I hear it all the time, you have the nicest units in a 3-block radius, and so I'm able to charge an extra $100 a month compared to other people, and by the way, get really good tenants. So,
and it's been the same with me since I was starting with the bottom of the barrel properties, and I was buying rough properties. I had to make them stand out. So that's why I've been renovating and redoing properties. I did the first one in Texas in 2008, 9, and I just have not stopped. And it always, like, I always have a point to be the nicest one in the complex or the nicest one on the street, because it attracts a better tenant, even if you're in a rougher neighborhood, because they're going to pay a little bit more. One other thing that kind of correlates with that, a lot of times I see where there's opportunities. Like I bought a 2-bedroom in 2021 that was 1,100 square feet, and I knew I could find a 3rd bedroom if I looked hard enough, and they had this insanely ridiculous kitchen, like so big, I built a 3rd bedroom off of it. There was no reason for the kitchen to be like 25 by 10. It was just a huge kitchen. And it had a formal dining room. So it wasn't like I stole half the kitchen and there was nowhere to eat. I just used the formal dining room properly and took the back end of the kitchen, which made it into a 3-bedroom. So I look for those opportunities. Is it worth it buying land and holding for a few years for a flip? I know people that only flip land. I think that it's a slow process. And a lot of times when I buy the land, like I did buy something in Dallas and I bought it for 3,000 and I was all excited when I sold it for 27,000. But now that 27,000 they're selling for 80,000. So you never know when the top is there. I was psyched because my 3,000 was 27,000. But obviously whoever I sold it to probably has flipped it. It's been flipped twice now, and I believe there's actually a house on that lot. So you never know where the top is. So it's
Yeah.
a guessing game, just like the stock market.
I was gonna say it's just like stocks. I always say as long as you're green, and obviously you want to be as green as possible, but you truly never know what the top is. So, yeah, I would totally agree with you on that.
Sorry if you've answered this. I'm in Chile is trying to tune in. What do you use to run comps and finance for other states and areas that you're not familiar with? So a couple of tools that I use. Rentometer is free. So if I'm looking at a property, you can put in the address and act like you're renting your own house, and you can see where the comps are for that. The second thing that I do for like crime stats, there is a neighborhood crime.org. I can't remember the exact on that, but I do look at crime stats, and I do like I can tell you in Ohio and in Texas, the grades are on the county website when you go pay the
Yeah.
taxes. And that's another thing that I try and encourage people to do. If you're making an offer on a property, look up the taxes and see if the owner owes something, because you're going to get a better deal if they owe something. So I'm looking at the tax page. I'm looking at Rentometer to make sure that my estimated rent is real, because Zestimate is usually way off. And you want to look at the crime there, because you don't, this is, and I get this DM a lot. Like there was a guy that I recently got. He's like, I bought this fourplex in Toledo and I'm losing money every month. He's like, what gives? And as soon as he gave me the address, I'm like, dude, you bought in the worst street in Toledo where nobody wants to live. Nobody wants to do work over there. Why would you put money into this when nobody wants to live there and nobody wants to do work over there? It's just not the right property. I'm like, you should sell this and get into a neighborhood that people actually want to be in. Because it doesn't matter how nice you make it. If it's a really, really rough neighborhood, nobody's going to want to be there.
Yeah. The only thing I'll add to that is I've joined some Facebook groups that are really helpful too, with other landlords, with other people in the area, and you can just, they'll be posting their stuff in there. You'll see the comps, and just Facebook in general. Like I go out on the sell page, because that's how I list a lot. I use apartments.com to manage all my properties, which is free, by the way. And I collect rent through there too and swear by it. And I'm not on baby duty anymore, so I can flip my camera on too. But and then I use Facebook to list stuff too, and you can see when we're the same place you list it, where other people are listing it, and you can kind of get comps there too. So Facebook's honestly a fantastic resource in my opinion, Tom. I don't know if you agree.
100% agree. One thing that I would add, I actually have a paid subscription to the local newspaper in Toledo, because I've made like a lot of money just keeping up with what's going on in the neighborhoods. Like they did a $2,500 grant for exterior improvements in this one zip code that I would have never known if I didn't have the newspaper. And I had 3 properties in that zip code. I'm like, holy shit, I'm going to apply for this. And I went in. So that kind of just helps me. And same with following the city hall and stuff on Facebook, because then you stay on top of what's actually happening there. And that's how, where I'm buying this property, I know about all these things that have already been approved for the zip code, because I'm following the newspaper, I'm following this, and I'm following that. So for me, it made sense to just pay the $70 a year for the newspaper, because it keeps me up on that kind of stuff. And all 3 of my properties got approved for that grant. So I got $7,500 free to do exterior work just by subscribing. So don't shy away from those simple things, because there's some money there.
Agreed. To double down on that, and I'll be interested to see if you think you could do the same thing, but it's probably different because I realize you're not local. I'm able to come out here. I've gotten to know like some of the city inspectors. And so what I've started to do is, before I buy, I'll call the city, let them know I'm going to buy a property. And I'm like, hey, I really want you guys to come do an inspection or send me your last inspection report. And they've started doing it for free for me. So I don't even do like public inspections anymore. I have the city do it for me because that's all that really matters is what the city wants you to do on a property. But the other thing by getting to know them is I've learned about this program now that I've done on a couple properties. It's called like the Happy Homes program, and where I'm buying in these C neighborhoods, right? They're trying to gentrify, for example, as one of our members just said, or revitalize is the word they like to use. But and so if you're willing to, buy properties in that, I've gotten lead pipes replaced at no cost. They've re-insulated for me. They've put in new front and side doors at no cost. Like I have a 5-bedroom house that because I can't remember what I did for the city on it. But they're coming in, they're re-insulating it for me. They're putting a new front door on. Forget
That's
what else.
awesome.
They're replacing a couple windows, and I don't have to pay a cent. And so I would totally double down on what you just said, Tom. It pays to go the extra mile, I guess is what we're both saying. And it literally will pay to go the extra mile, I think is our point. So
for sure. And I do want to hit this home. Mommy or someone or Mooney just said, I've seen a lot of listings on Facebook. Be cautious. There's a lot of scammers. I had a scammer trying to rent me my own property out there.
That is
a lot
true,
of times, if it sounds too good to be true, it typically is. Don't share personal information with them, because I just see scammers as well. So I don't want you to get caught into the I'm on Facebook, it's good. There are scammers out there. Be protective with what you're sharing with them. You can look up the county records to see who actually owns it and does that. And the deal that I'm buying, I saw that on Facebook while I was at the gym, and the first thing I did was bounce over to the county website. I'm like, oh, he owes $1,500. This is the same Facebook name as the person who I'm messaging with. Yes, this might be legit. But knowing that he owed that extra tax money gave me a little wiggle room and in my negotiation with the price, and being quick was the other thing that kind of got it over with. As you buy, you're going to see that you're going to want to go with like one title company, so you don't have to constantly send paperwork over and over to different title companies. And that has also helped me in both states, having a title company that I can lean on, because I do not want to buy a property with a bunch of liens on it. I don't want to buy a property that's on the teardown list for the city. I don't want to buy these properties that are too far gone, that are going to cost me more in the long run than buying. So as you build up your team, which is something that I try and hit home to everyone, you will, it gets easier and it starts making money. And it does not make money from day one, but it's a buy and hold game, just like stocks. Like my best performing stocks are the ones that I've had in my portfolio for the past 11 years, not the ones that I put in my portfolio yesterday. So I think that that's important as well. And at this point, beyond buying this one, I'm taking on more passion projects than, oh, I need to make more income. Because at this point, I'm good. I want to maintain, I want to improve my properties, but it's not about continuing to build and putting unnecessary stress on it for me. Okay. Are we good?
Great. Yeah. Any other questions, team? If not, we'll let Tom get about his night and just thank him for the time. We so appreciate it, dude.
Thank you for having me.
It's been awesome.
I should have brought some before and afters, because that's kind of what everyone loves to see those, and that from redoing. That's how you can differentiate yourself. Even if you're buying in a rough neighborhood, if you make that property look good, you take pride in your neighbor or your property, you stand out a bunch of people who just don't care. So mine always is mowed and looks good. And
I think I'm sure you've run into it. There's so many, the term slumlord is a real thing. And
I call them tired landlords, because I think that there's opportunities there with some of those tired landlords, because they can't maintain it properly. It's expensive. I'm putting $10,000 back into the properties every month with doing this or this preventative maintenance, but it's worth it. It's 100% worth it. So totally, I'm glad that I stuck with it. Guys, I'm at the Frugal Gay 11 on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. most active on Twitter. If you have a question or you have a deal that you want looked at or anything like that, feel free to DM. I appreciate you guys listening. Thank you.
See you, Tom.
See
Thanks,
ya.
everyone.